From sky-high housing prices to grocery bills that seem to creep up month by month, many in Taiwan are feeling the squeeze. And to understand how rising prices are affecting daily life, Connected took to the streets. We spoke with everyday shoppers at Binjiang Market, right in the heart of Taipei, to find out how their spending habits are changing. Take a look.
我买菜都很信任那个老板，他说多少我就付多少。觉得我常常买就是有涨息有调回了，我觉得差不多啦。
就比较不会去餐厅吃饭了，因为餐厅会因为人力，然后还有一些物价的调涨，然后他们的价格就会提高，
可能买的量就会减少。以前可能会看品质，但现在可能就是冲着便宜就去买。
葱啦，前面那边是1把35。 这边有的卖到50、60，那我就会回头。我现在没买，我要回头再去买它的。你说牛番茄，你看那一盘要70块才6颗，但是那边呢卖一袋哦，要不6、7颗，它才30。刚说他要收了，那全部都卖我，就算80块就应该是谈了2、3倍的便宜。我买了回去还会称，哪一家那个偷斤减两，以后我就永远不会走进去了。
And it's always worth doing your research. For insight into both how everyday people and policymakers are navigating a changing economy, we're joined by Dr. Wen-Tai Hsu, a research fellow at the Institute of Economics, Academia Sinica, here in Taipei, and in Los Angeles, Dr. William Yu, who's an economist at the UCLA Anderson Forecast. Wen-Tai, I am going to start with you. We're seeing Trump-era tariff policy shifting by the day. How should Taiwan be navigating that?
This is, again, a big question. so the simple answer is that just to put it very simply, okay? Of course, Trump is they demand something. So you need to give them something. You cannot just give them nothing. But again, you don't give them too much. Okay, so of course, government doesn't say that, but then, as people in academia, we can say that. So the idea is that you should not give too much because everything is so uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now. I mean, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen like 1 month from now, right? So first of all, the tariff is not settled yet. And second, there may be a currency war, but that hasn't come yet. We don't know when that's going to come and what's the scale of that. And also that you can consider that the American voters, they can become unhappy. So there's a midterm election. And the midterm election, the pressure of that can be a sort of a curb for the Trump tariffs, not to be too crazy. So I guess the thing here is that you don't try to give too much, don't try to please them too much. It's just please them to a degree that is acceptable, but don't give out the core benefits of Taiwan too much and too soon. And also be prepared for the currency war because I think it's going to come after the tariffs are settled.
Great. William, I'd love for you to get your perspective on what's happening in the U.S., seeing that you're right there, and give a sense of, you gave us a picture of all the different moving parts earlier of the economy. Give us a sense of all these tariff movements and how people are navigating that in the U.S.
Yes, I would like to provide my perspective, from like a third party, because I grew up in Taiwan and I live in the United States for a long time. So I respectfully disagree with Wen-Tai's argument. I think Taiwanese government and people should fully support Trump administration's trade policy, wholeheartedly support that. All right, because we had a very serious, not just Taiwan, but Taiwan is one of the several countries which had severe trade imbalance with the United States. So we can look at the data. So really, of course, we can say actually United States benefit a lot from this export from Taiwan. We all know that. But right now, U.S. had a problem. We got this budget deficit problem. And then it is very important, really had a very resilient and strong U.S. economy because the U.S. play a very important role in terms of stabilize global community in terms of not just economy, but also other geopolitical things. I think right now, because Taiwan has a huge trade surplus with the United States. So Taiwan has a position, very good position, to help the United States. United States has some kind of problem. Usually we say trade deficit is related to budget deficit, and United States had a huge deficit problem, and we had this cumulative debt over the years. On the other hand, Taiwan actually had a very good budget, government budget. The debt ratio is very low. So I think it would be very good for both Taiwan and United States that Taiwan can have a very good, very fast negotiation result in terms of trade and tariff, all kinds of things.
So are you saying in that sense then Taiwan accept what the U.S. is putting on the table, William?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, yes.
What are your thoughts on that, Wen-Tai?
Well, part of that I agree, but not all of them.
So let me give you an example. Sorry, and then you can respond. For example, United States hope Taiwan can lower the tariff on U.S. export to Taiwan. For example, cars. Just use a cars as an example. I know lower the tariff on U.S. export, especially car to Taiwan, will impact Taiwan's domestic car industry. But think about the consumer. Taiwanese consumer will have better, more choices, lower American car in Taiwan's market, more competition. So that is good thing as a whole. Yeah, that's just one example.
So okay, so let me respond just as a discussion, right? This it's always okay to agree to disagree, but then let me just respond with my point here. So number one is that if we calculate the average tariff, or either it's a weighted average or simple average, the average tariff of Taiwan to the U.S. or to the world is actually not very high. So we are around like less than 3%. And so car is one exception, but there are not so many exceptions like this. And car industry is very important because it's like there's lots of families that rely on this. It's like 200,000 people. Okay, so rely on this. And but that is something that I think it can be lowered. It certainly can be lowered. And so I do not disagree with that. But my point is that across the board, across all the goods and services, there are not too many things to be lowered. So I generally agree with the government sort of gesture to say that we can start with sort of zero trade tariff to start with, sort of like, because actually the U.S. tariff to Taiwan before Trump was not high either. So if we can mutually just lower this down to close to zero, and I think that's fine. That would certainly hurt the car industry, and we try to help them in some regard. But the part that I do not agree as much is the part about the budget issue. I understand that U.S. has a very big fiscal deficit right now, but then, and the bond is also, I mean, the debt is also big, but then I don't think the Trump government is sincere about this, because if they are sincere, they will not propose such a huge tax cut that's just passed a few days ago. So that is, to me, it's just inconsistent. So I kind of think that, so the core benefit I was talking about here is not really about tariff. The core benefit here is that the Trump government is trying to use tariff as a tool to force Taiwanese government, to force Taiwanese companies, especially those in the semiconductors and the ICT, to go invest in the U.S. I think that's their main goal. And to me, that's the core benefit of Taiwan. We should try to reduce the trade surplus to the U.S. Okay, I agree with that. But I think the core benefit part here is that how much of this core business that we should just let them just invest in the U.S. That's a big issue, especially for the TSMC. So that is why that in the past months or past 2 months that the government, the legislature passed a law to say that it has to be N-1, right? Because N here is the best technology that we have for the TSMC in Taiwan, but whatever is invested in the U.S. should be N-1. And I think that's the right move. So that's what I mean by protecting the core benefit here. That we try to give them something, the TSMC invest there is fine, but if as long as N-1 and the scale is not too big, I think that's fine.
This has been so interesting. I feel like we need an entirely different conversation on both government policy and fiscal and monetary policy at play for both Taiwan and the US. But I am going to take you back to the streets of Taipei to talk about the cost of living. Now, few things spark as much debate as the cost of housing. The Xinyi National House Price Index, the only long-term data set focused on Taiwan's second-hand housing market, is published by the College of Commerce at the National Chengchi University and Xinyi Realty. Now, according to this index, which uses Q1 of 2016 as its baseline, housing prices surged to 168 points by the first quarter of 2025. And as this chart shows, the rise has been both sharp and sustained over the past 2 decades. So, as promised, we'll go back to Binjang Market to find out how people feel about real estate prices.
你要像年轻人其实去买房，没有家里的帮助，年轻人自己靠自己存钱买房，其实不太可能，连头期款可能都拿不出来。而且现在物价这么高，年轻人薪水也没有涨，就有点入不敷出吧，就变你赚多少就要花多少。我觉得就不如就该吃吃该花花，不用想着去存那些钱，就能开心的生活就好。
如果以现在他们的薪水4万多块来是不容易嘛，可是住家里应该可以存到一点，可是他们就觉得很放纵自己啊，就觉得很失望啊，我不知道。
Wen-Tai, you've spoken about earlier about structural and policy issues in Taiwan's real estate market. But when it comes to the people who can't change the system, what options do they really have here in Taiwan, given the kind of price surges we've seen in the real estate market?
Well, that's a difficult question. That's a very good question. In fact, I don't have a good answer for that. I have to be honest with you. Because it's like, just listen to what that young person was saying, right? So really there's no hope. With the salary that they earn and the housing price is a very big disconnect here. So what can I do? What I can say is that basically it's like, if you want to live in Taipei and sort of the central Taipei, then it is very difficult. And so one option is that you can rent, right? And so don't think about buying. But there's some people who have very sticky demand for purchasing, just having a housing ownership. And so for that kind of people, so it's almost impossible to buy that in Taipei with sort of ordinary people's salary, right? And so what you do here is that you can go to the outskirts of the city. And there are many sort of replotted areas, so-called Chonghua-Chu, like in, say, for example, in Sanxia, Xinzhuang, Wugu, etc. So those are things that are really popping up. So that's the market. That's a market reaction to this high housing price. That at least at the outskirts of the city, that there you can still afford to buy. But then that's the outskirts. So that means that you have to sort of suffer from commuting. So that is bad. But then that's kind of like the thing that you can. The only thing you can do. Now, one last thing to say here is that, right? So if you're young, right, and you work hard, you try to save. Once you save, you want to hopefully in the future you want to buy housing. But I would say that the housing boom will have its limit, right? And we don't know when it's gonna burst. So there's a risk here, and the whole world's getting riskier and riskier. Okay, and so really my suggestion is that if you have money to save in a balanced way, so you have a balanced portfolio, that you don't put everything into housing. You have something in the ETFs and something in other things. So just make sure that you have a balanced portfolio to protect yourself, because the world is getting really riskier.
It is indeed. And William, what's the housing market looking like in the US?
So in the United States, we also had a very serious housing affordability issue. So let me give you some kind of background. So as we previously talked about, this high inflation in the United States started 2021. So the Federal Reserve has to raise the interest rate. So right now, the interest rate, short-term federal funds rate is about 4.3%, 4.4%, which is kind of high compared to over the past 2 decades. So what happened is this high interest rate had 2 effects. The first one is it directly impacted the 30-year mortgage rate. So what happened is if you want to buy a house, you are just young adult, you just got married, you want to buy a house, the mortgage rate is so high, which is 6 or 7%, which is much higher than the average level over the past 2 decades. So it become very unaffordable. So what happened in the past is when the Federal Reserve raised the interest rate, it will lower the home price. So although the home buyer, they are paying higher mortgage rate, but because the housing cost is lower, so they kind of offset this kind of problem. But what happened in the United States is this round of the tightening monetary policy has not reduced the home price. Because if it does, it will actually cause a recession, which is another bad outcome. So what happened? While this high interest rate did not cause the lower housing price, and the reason is because we had a fundamental shortage of the housing supply in the United States for the past probably more than 10 years. And if you ask why, that's a kind of another big story. After 2008, the housing slumps, we had this kind of long-term structural problem. So in short, we also had a serious housing affordability problem. Used to be a California problem, but right now it spread to the rest of the country. Yeah.
Wen-Tai, we're just about running out of time, but I'm going to ask you this based on what we see in Taipei, because I feel like what's happening in Taipei is happening in a lot of cities around the world. The lack of affordability for that younger people say many things are out of reach. Their wages are not seemingly keeping up. What is your outlook for the younger generation here who perhaps have just been in the employment market over the past 5 years or so?
So I guess, well, a cliche is to say, accumulate your human capital. So, but then that's a cliche, but that's actually very true. So then apart from that is like, it's like Taiwan has to do some reform. So one thing that's really scary here is that, okay, so long story short, okay, there could be a currency war, okay? If what happens to Japan between 1985 to 1995, if it happens again to Taiwan, it'll be very bad. What that means is that when there was a currency appreciation forced by the US, and then if the central government does wrong things, so that the interest rate, and then that means that together is that there's lots of money supply from abroad because they want to come to Taiwan because the currency is going to appreciate. They want to arbitrage on this. And also locally, if you have increased the interest rate going down, that fuels this even more. And that's what happened in Japan between 1985 to 1990. So that there was a very rapid stock market and housing boom, but then eventually that burst. That bursted in 1990 and started the lost decades in Japan. And I'm afraid that the Taiwan situation right now is very similar to Japan at the time, that this can happen. And so that's why I say people have to buckle up. So in the times to come, that you have to buckle up. So you can put something into housing. If you want to do that as soon as you can, okay? Because when the price is rising too fast, don't go in there now. Because if you go too late, and if you burst it, then you'll be the last one which really capture, and you're going to suffer from a very big loss. So if you want to do anything about housing ownership, okay, do it now. Okay, if you want to do anything about the stock market, you can always do. Okay, so that part is fine. But I'm saying that it's really getting riskier. So if you want to do any kind of saving, still again, not put everything into housing. That's very dangerous. If you want to do it now. And if you see housing price going up too crazy because of the currency appreciation, then you start to have to think. You start to have to worry about sort of a bubble burst. But coming back to this is like, think about this is like, okay, this is a difficult time and things have to change with the government. I strongly advocate for this, but then at the same time, it's like if you just work and then rent, well, your life can still be pretty good. It's like, do you want to suffer from a 40% mortgage? Okay, so right now in Taipei and Hsinchu, some places that the young people, they buy very expensive very expensive housing, so they suffer from the 40% of their income put into housing mortgage just to pay the mortgage, right? So that is one kind of life that you can have, right? 40% of your income is dumped into housing for, I'm not sure what, right? But then on the other hand, it's like you just rent. If you rent, it's about 20% of your income. So you have 20% more you can spend on travel and so on and so forth. So people might have given too much weight to have the housing ownership, I would have to say. And I think the young people, they know about that too.
And before we wrap up here, William, actually, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on the trajectory for Taiwan's economy. And is there a danger? Does it look like a risk of following Japan's trajectory that we've seen between the 80s and 90s and where it's at now?
Yeah, yes, indeed, there's a risk. But I think that's why I say Taiwan it's better be getting a trade deal with the United States as soon as possible with anything, basically just accept everything United States requests. Otherwise, just like Wen-Tai was talking about, there could be a currency kind of a demand, and there could be some kind of disruption of the asset bubble whatsoever, foreign kind of money coming in or out. So there's a lot of problems. So United States is the strongest, most innovative economy in the world. And Taiwan has made a very wonderful decision to go with the United States, especially after the first trade war in 2018 between U.S. and China. At that time, there's a lot of Taiwanese company moving back to Taiwan. Actually, Taiwan benefit a lot from that. And so I think right now, based on the current administration's policy in Taiwan, I think it's right, in the right track. So they should continue to do that. And then with that, I think Taiwan's economy will be great.
Right. I feel like you both set us up for an entirely other conversation. So much to talk about, but thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Wen-Tai Hsu, Research Fellow at the Institute of Economics, Academia Sinica, right here in Taipei. And in Los Angeles, Dr. William Yu, who's an economist at the UCLA Anderson Forecast. Feeling the pressure of making every dollar count? Got any tips or tricks to save a little extra? Well, share them in the comments below. Click the video next to me to find out how the tariffs, the pandemic, and everything in between are shaping the prices you see on the shelves. And if you don't want to miss more stories on tech and business from Taiwan, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell.